Welcome, one and all, to the Success Curious podcast. It's your man, Andy, here. And today I am absolutely honored to have someone who, as a start of a 10, is a heck of a lot more educated than me. So that's always nice. Hopefully, by osmosis, I'll become more profound, perhaps. But Danielle Dobson is a leadership expert, and in particularly when it comes to decoding traditional ways of being, seeing, thinking, believing around how leadership should rock and roll in a business sense, in an executive sense, particularly around the decoding of roles when it comes to specific demographics and cultures and all this sort of stuff. The world is about this nice big melting pot. And one thing that Danielle is absolutely incredible on it is making sure that you guys can decode all of those different components and put them into some sort of order that allow you to be the most effective version of yourself from a leadership point of view. She is an author. She's a media commentator. She is an absolute superstar when it comes to navigating change and making damn sure that you take action instead of sitting in your own procrastination. Danielle, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board. Thank you so much for joining us and increasing the credibility of this damn thing by a notch. How the devil are you?
I'm brilliant, thanks. I just giggling. I think it's hilarious that you think I'm super smart.
See, humility, gang. That is the first sign of an intelligent human being. Right there. Right there. Don't be fooled by that. Hey, Danielle, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board. I'm really looking forward to having a real proper conversation with you because you have most certainly been something of a lighthouse, a pioneer, a spokesperson, particularly when it comes to the breaking down of gender-based barriers around certain roles in executive leadership groups and so on and so forth. But the thing that I love about what you do and how you go about it is you don't come at it in that whole crusader type energy that tends to just cause more drama than it does good. And I really, really like that about you. So I'm super excited to have this conversation. Um, First off, though, before we crack on with the chat, give everybody a little bit of an MO as to who you are and why the heck I love everything that you do.
Well, I can't answer the second part, but thank you. That is a massive question to start with, and I think that gives a sense of how I think. But I think who I am is a curious code breaker, because I'm always looking to understand things and get to the heart of it, like really to the core of things. So I try to make sense of, messy, complex realities, like in
Mm.
business and in work, and help people just find better ways to be, more human and increase performance. So, and ultimately what I'm driven by is building capacity in others so they can be amazing. That's who I am.
Nice, nice. What led you to be in this sort of world, to have this as a mission? Was there anything specific, or was there any specific things that went on in your previous existence before you became this sort of lighthouse for the world? Or what was it? What was it that led you to become this sort of leader?
Yeah, it's really great to reflect on that. And I always wonder, was there just one thing or was it always running through? So is that curiosity to bring different ideas, to innovate, to share conversations and information with others to make people's lives better. And as a curious kid, I had a street newspaper, the English Street Gazette, because my dad was a printer, a typesetter. He'd bring home the masthead, and I'd just go around asking anyone if they had any news or any problems that I can
That's so
solve,
cool.
any mysteries. Also in primary school, I set up a newspaper. I did work experience at the Herald and Weekly Times in Melbourne, where I grew up. I was the chief editor of the Uni magazine. So always loving conversations, and I just thought if I could get paid to speak with people, that would be my dream job.
Right.
But my parents saw things a little bit differently. So in high school, I was a bit of an all-rounder in terms of subjects, and in particular accounting. So my parents said to me, Danielle, you can be anything that you want in the world of finance. So I
Right.
became an accountant. a CPA. So, which was amazing. It took me all over the world. So I lived and worked in 5 different countries,
Wow.
all sorts of roles, from a steel mill in Italy to for about 6 months to Silicon Valley-based company in the US to Soho in London. All these amazing different opportunities.
Wow.
But there's always something niggling at me. I had leadership roles and I loved building capacity in others, but I just always knew there was something different for me that wasn't finance and accounting, but I brought all of my strengths and skills, my curiosity, my critical thinking, my, love of connection to all the different finance roles I had, which was good because my last job at that Silicon Valley-based company, I was an internal auditor. So it's really
Wow.
you got to make friends in those.
No, bad to say. You got to make friends because everyone's seeing you as an enemy to begin with,
That's
right?
right,
For
exactly. Walk in the
sure.
place.
For
So
sure.
I used all those skills and strengths, and I had my first child over in America, and something weird happened. It was like as soon as he came along, it was like I I know what's important in life now. And I
Mm,
know it's just made everything's just solidified. And I thought the difference between staying in that corporate world, making guides, so there's all guides back then, engineering services and those sort of businesses, rich versus raising this human, uh,
mm,
it's a no brainer. So that sort of changed everything. And I thought, I've got to actually create a life where I can, bring my children, my boys, I've got 3 now, integrate them into what I do, not treat them as separate. So, um, create this like through line of what's most important, and so that I'm not jumping in different boxes. I'm not having to mask up. I'm being able to do something that's building capacity not only in my family but also in my work because
mm.
I didn't want to be stretched too thin. So I think it was really that. It was that realization. And I said to myself, I'm never going back to corporate after Alex came along. So it
Nice.
just snowballed from there.
Amazing. Amazing. That gives us a much better idea as to, yeah, I can see why quite clearly because I dare say, without wanting to pry too much, I dare say that you would have faced, especially being in those industries that you just mentioned there, tremendously heavily dominated by chaps.
Hmm.
Um, you'd have copped a number of challenges and hurdles and assumptions and presumptions and all those sorts of things, I guess.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. I After I did the research for the book, where I was speaking to people about that very thing, um, many leaders, including some males, I realized that I didn't experience as many as others did. So,
Right.
so my drive and mission around understanding what I now call the gender code, the first code I discovered, was really not about righting any wrongs that I'd experienced. Because what happens is and I'm sure you uh, feel this too sometimes, Andy, but when you listen to others and you hear their stories and you hear the struggle and the challenges that they're facing, it just triggered something deeply inside of me,
Right.
something that just compelled me to do something about it.
Right.
And that's when I did more interviews, did the research, looked right back. I used everything. This is, me, that curious detective kind of code
Mhm.
breaker. I looked at neuroscience, psychology, history, politics, philosophy, religion, economics,
Mm.
trying to find all of these threads and just all of a through line and how did we get to where we are? So I
Interesting.
just expanded it.
That's so, so interesting. Oh man, there's a whole bunch of topics we could talk about from this. This is so good. Um, Now, before we crack on though, one of our textbook questions that we always ask all of our guests is
Mhm.
what their definition is of success. Now, I believe that there's a few components to it, being success, connection, influence, and happiness, and they all live in a little ecosystem where one can't survive without the other. Danielle Dobson, what is your definition of a successful human?
I love this question because I think about it a lot. So I feel, and this is for each person to define, and thank you for asking me what mine is. So I believe success is when external success and someone's internal world match. So
Mm.
where there's congruency between who they are, what matters most, how they show up at work and in home, and when they can use their strengths in the service of something bigger, and when they can take responsibility for their impact on others, and where you keep on growing, not from a place of I'm not good enough or I'm less than, but from a place of curiosity about what else is possible.
Oh, did you practice that?
No, but I think about it a lot in my head
I
because
tell
I'm
you what,
always yeah.
that is the most polished answer I think I've ever heard in the 90 odd episodes that we've done so far. That was epic.
Oh.
If there was a home run, that would be it. It would be in the bleachers, like big time. That was amazing. What I really want to ask though, you talked about external actions and whatnot, internal world, and having them match.
Mhm.
Um, do you find that when you were doing your accounting, you said that there was always something. Do you find that there was probably that's what it was. There was a bit of a disconnect between who
Mhm.
you were and what you were doing.
Mm, absolutely. So each time I moved countries, I would think, "This is the time I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna do a new career."
Mm,
And instead of doing that, I'd do a course or I'd learn something else. So I did a course when I was in London, a course on philosophy and journalism. And then in the US, I did something on personal training. And then different countries, I did different things. But I never had that courage, I would say, because I'm sure you get this because you talk about this a lot, but I have a strong need to have financial security. So
right.
so that's what the finance career gave me,
Mm,
and I didn't have the courage to jump ship for that very reason. I grew up in a working class family where things were scarce, so I never wanted to be in that situation that my parents were in. So that was my main driver. But then sometimes you just get pushed, off that treadmill and you
yeah.
bump your head and then you wake up and it's like, "Oh, what have I been doing?" So that's what happened when Alex came. Also, we moved to back to Australia from, the US at the time. So and I was just in different contexts. So I a lot of us, we face these decisions, but if we're in that same context all the time,
Mm,
swimming in that same water, sometimes it's hard to jump out of the fish tank. But
yeah.
because I moved back here, um, I'm originally from Melbourne and moved to Wollongong area. I didn't have all my family's interstate or overseas. Ex-husband's family's in the UK. So I had to change. It kind of forced me. I couldn't really go back to work.
Mm,
And I also knew that everything I do has to be 100% because I'm 100% a type of person, and I just couldn't see how I could make being 100% parent and being 100% ideal worker, how that would match. So
mm.
I jumped in. So I wanted to be really clear about that sometimes it takes that change of context or something massive to help us shift out and take that mask off or do that thing that's really gonna serve us and make and have that integrity in all our roles.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And you could argue that what you're saying there about financial or dependency on that financial security, you could
Mhm,
actually argue that it's probably one of the reasons why so many people at the minute are struggling to they're really struggling to stay the course on something that they genuinely love to do because of the
mhm,
fact that the instantaneous nature of gratification, whether it is financial or otherwise, or because of the speed of the world, people are feeling that anxiety to a greater extent that they need to be earning said money in order
mhm,
to keep up with the world.
mhm,
Because the the reason why I mention that is because you when you took that decision when Alex was born, you took that decision, you went on a path, and you know, and you know, you and I have been on similar paths in that respect. Um, how many times does your loyalty to your purpose get tested, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And loyalty is something that I'm seeing is becoming becoming in increasingly short supply, right?
yeah,
In the world, and I think that loyalty, having having the courage to have the loyalty towards our own purpose,
yeah,
it's getting more and more challenging, right? I mean,
yeah.
how it was there a time, or has there been moments, has there been occasions where you've experienced that sort of level of concern, and that you've had your loyalty tested when it comes to your purpose?
Absolutely. So if I look at, eh, and here's the thing, the mission that I was on to understand the gender code. So I was
Mm,
interviewing all these amazing, mostly women, but also men as well, who seem to be doing both well. So working and parenting or caring. Not all were carers or parents. Not about 10% weren't, because I just didn't think it was possible to do both well. But
right.
having these conversations with these women who seem to do things well and have things put together, um, at first it was like, "Oh my god, like, maybe I could have, kept on that trajectory. Maybe I could have been a CFO or a
Mm,
CEO or something," knowing that that's ridiculous because, no, I never wanted that, even when I was in there, that was not my path. Um, but that made me doubt, you know, what, my choices. But now I look at my 3 teenage sons, and I just don't regret 1 second. So, I guess my message there is that sometimes we can doubt it, and, these moments of they're mostly around scarcity and comparison do pop up. But I think if you're really connected to that choice, that through line, that golden thread, I call it, and you know what's important to you. And here's the thing, sometimes you can't necessarily name it. I mean, I used to always think it was well-being. So the
mm,
well-being is important. Wasn't in my 20s, I must say, it was a crazy decade, but
mm.
either side of that, uh, well-being and health. But I think when I dug deeper than that, it's actually growth is the most important thing to me. So if I'm growing in whatever role I'm in, whatever pursuit I'm doing, then I'm good. It's okay. So yes, I did have shaky moments, but now going through that, reflecting, coming to this realization, I'm good when they come up. Still happens, but it's just shorter.
And it sort of segues me into something that I do really want to have a chat to you about today, which is, um, when it comes to staying the path and having
Mhm.
pressures of norms, the
Mhm.
what is seen as norms in whether it's work or play or life or whatever it is, right? The archetypes, right? Which
Mhm.
are becoming increasingly they're becoming increasingly fractured. I think it's safe to say these days, the stereotypes of, woman in kitchen, man in, man out hunting and all that. I think that's been, well and truly destroyed to a degree. But I'll talk. Bring it back to that in a sec. Having the courage for, and let's just we'll talk about it in the gender sense, because you have got your book, The Gender Code, right? So I just want to
Mhm.
talk about it in the gender sense without turning this into a genderific conversation.
Yeah.
Um, um, like that word courage, which I think is going to be the theme of this conversation. Um, I wanted to ask you the obvious question about the courage required to step out from the norm. All right,
Mhm.
but also your thoughts around the courage to accept different as well on the other
Mm.
side of it, right? Which I think is something that we don't really get to talk about, or isn't getting talked about as much, because it takes two to tango, right? You
Yeah.
always hear about these stories of someone giving someone different a chance and so on and so forth. But
Mhm.
the courage required on both sides of that interaction is
Mhm.
really quite significant. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, talk to us about the probably the well-versed, courage required to take that leap, but the
Mhm.
courage on the other side as well, from the people that are willing to take a punt on that different person.
Yes. Absolutely. So the courage to do something different. So Yeah, my main premise in life in general is that we're all wired differently. We all have a different code, that we've developed over our lifetime, which formulates our beliefs, our values, our stories, our patterns of behavior. So that is the first thing. We are all so incredibly different. And we've formed those codes over our lifetime based on all those external things like the gender code, the ideal worker code, all these different code, cultural code, family code, workplace code, whatever it is, performance code. And then we have the internal code. And that has been built over our lifetime based on nature, nurture, and neuroplasticity. That's a quote
Mm,
from my favorite neuroscientist, Dr. Sarah McCoy. So the nature, that's our DNA. The nurture, that's our lifetime environment, what we're exposed to. And that, for me, comes down to one word: messages. The messages we've received, who's delivered them, how often, how much we've chosen to believe them, and how much we've embedded them into our own code.
mm,
And then we have the neuroplasticity. That's our brain's incredible ability to adapt, grow, and rewire. So that's the yin and the yang. We can choose something different, but also we keep reinforcing what we're hearing. So it's an opportunity and it's a challenge. Now, the reason why I went into that detail is because, we're also incredibly different. What's courage for one person and standing up is just the normal coding for another,
mm,
because they've grown up in one person who needs the courage has grown up in an environment where courage hasn't been um, rewarded. It's actually
mm,
been punished. So
mm.
that requires even more courage. Someone who's grown up in an environment like myself, I played AFL football in the 80s for my local team. My dad supported me, and so did my mum and my brothers.
Yeah.
Um, I did, all sorts of different male kind of related things because my parents supported me. Whereas if you have someone who doesn't support you, that's a lot of it, because we're all part, like I think you alluded to it before. Our our bodies are a system which we cannot hack in one go. And then we're part of bigger systems, families, workplaces, communities. So understanding who we are and then that system is so important.
Mm.
So for what looks like courage for one person is just pedestrian for another.
Yeah, for sure.
It's what they've got to overcome.
For sure.
So then the same goes for the in terms of that intention and thought process for people who are open to change.
Mm,
And what sort of environment have they um, grown up in? What messages have they heard? What's been punished? What's been rewarded? And I think there's two key things here in terms of someone in that position. I think the first one, or maybe they're equal, is having a sense of personal security in
mm,
themselves. Like, not, driven from maybe ego and that sort of thing, but really wanting to be part of something bigger and a greater good, and serve others, but being secure in themselves and who they are. I think
mm,
that puts you in a great position to be open to something new and different. Because let's be honest, sometimes it can feel like if I give to that person, that means I get less. If I open the door for them, maybe the door will be shut for me.
mm,
So that is a real concern. I've done a lot of work in DE and I, and had a lot of robust discussions with groups of different diverse people, and in particular, I cut my teeth on my own brothers and dad. Started this. So there's that sense of personal security that I'm not going to lose. Then there's also the openness to change and the belief that if I actually do support this person, if I do open the door to someone who, needs a bit more of a leg up than me, the is that actually going to benefit the group?
mm,
If you believe that it will, that innovation, diversity, inclusion, different ideas, it's actually going to improve our performance, our profitability, and our productivity, then it's easier. But if you can't make that connection, then it's harder to do it, and it feels like you're being told what to do.
There's so many ways that this conversation could go, Danielle. Like, I wish I'd reserved like 5 hours to chat to you. I think the thing that's really sort of sticking out for me, I've got this visual in my head, right?
Mhm,
Based on what you've been saying there, around the compatibility of
mhm,
one person's code into another system, right?
mhm,
You know, if we're
mhm,
to look at it in a slightly sort of matrixy kind of way,
mhm,
you know, and it really is pertinent. The language that you use, which I think is fabulous, by the way, is very
mhm,
pertinent towards the way of the world these days, right? Like
mhm,
my kids are learning code right now, and I'm looking at it like and just getting flashbacks from back in the day where mum
yeah.
and dad were thinking the same thing, like, I'm never gonna be like that. And I'm like stood there going,
Mm,
shit. All right.
mm,
So you know, that compatibility of one person's code into a system and whether that person's code can add value to a system that is already running at a certain speed, at a certain pace, and so on and so forth. And someone having the ability to understand where those open docs are for that
mhm,
code to plug into, right?
mhm, mhm.
Very, very interesting. I really want to ask though, you know, and this is a bit of a question without notice because you've got me going off on a tangent now, which is great.
Great.
Um, when do you know, or when what are the signs that would make you realize that sometimes you need to break your code and change your code, or is it very much a case of your code is your code, right?
Mhm,
So you talk about neuroplasticity. That's why I'm going down this path, right? Because
mhm,
neuroplasticity in of itself is the ability to be able to have malleability in who you are
mhm,
and what you're doing, what you're thinking, and what you believe in, and what you're understanding, right?
mhm,
So talk to me about how people's codes can change, because then I'm going to link it and segue it to how society's codes changed afterwards. But talk to
mhm,
me from a personal point of view, because there's so many people that they are set. You talk about that whole set in their ways thing, right?
mhm,
And irrespective of how much people think that they are accepting of things based on their liberal thoughts and so on and so forth, they, I've noticed, are some of the most set mindsets that you'll ever see in your life.
mhm, mhm, absolutely. Can I share a story with you on how I came to this to answer your question?
I'd
Just
love
a
to.
quick
Oh yeah,
story.
talk to me. Yeah.
Okay, so I was exactly where you are now. So I had done all the research on the gender code, you know, the first code I discovered. So I like, okay, I've revealed it. I understand what it is. I've decoded it. This is the impact, and you know, this is what is actually happening. But I didn't know how to recode. Like, how do we move forward? What do we do differently?
Mm,
And about the same time, I happened to have some amazing, like, one-on-one time with my middle son when he was just 10 years old. This is back in 2018.
mm,
And we're in a cafe surrounded by surfboards, surfers, and we're sipping on our smoothies. And I just didn't want to interrupt this. I didn't want to squander this opportunity for an one-on-one because it's me. I'm a lead parent. You know, so I'm running the show by myself, raising my boys. Never used to get this one-on-one time. So I was determined to draw Leo into the conversation. So I started sharing with him a bit about the gender code and
mm,
how I was working on it and understood it, and it just wasn't fair. I just didn't know what to do about it. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, Mum, is your gender code anything like the coding we do at school? Because if it is, we can change it. I said, Oh, what do you mean, Leo? Tell me more. So I pressed record on my dictaphone
mm.
and I said, Tell me more. He said, Well, Mum, I'm the worker person in the family and my big brother bosses me around. But in coding, no one bosses me around. I get to do whatever I want when I make my own code. I said, Oh, tell me more. He's like, Well, Mum, as a coder, you've got to understand how code works. Because before I understood, I'd see some code somewhere and I didn't know what it meant. But now I can understand it. So I can make a choice. I can
Mm.
keep parts of the code that make sense. I can delete parts that don't work. And he said, Never forget this. You know what, Mum? The best bit is not all code's been created yet. So you can try new things that haven't been created and create it. Like,
Wow.
What? You have well, it took a while to settle. I kept listening back. Oh my God, Leo has just given me a 3-step process to recode the gender code, which then we can apply to ourselves, to our
Mm.
leadership, to our workplace, to society. We can choose what we want to keep, what we want to delete, and what we want to create. That's where the neuroplasticity comes in, but also creativity and curiosity and connection.
Mm. How good are kids?
I know, just
Honestly,
simply,
man, like, seriously, how good are kids? Like, they are the best teachers on the planet, aren't they? Right?
totally, yes,
Why
yep.
on earth do we have to grow up? Like,
I
why
know.
do we have to grow up? It makes us worse.
I know. He's
You know what I mean?
17 now, and I look back and I just think, "Oh, you're so curious back then." And then, because this is what happens. I mean, maybe this is another tangent, but it's like, because we know them since they're little, since they come out, right? For me, all 3 of my children, I could see the essence of who they were when they first came out. And as they've grown, they're just them in different contexts, maybe ramped up, maybe ramped down, but it's essentially who they are. But as they grow, so they're so curious and they're this so awe-inspired. An ant is just so amazing, or a digger or something like that. And then as they grow up, these layers, this coding, different coding starts to sort of cover who they are. So I see
Mm.
my job as reminding them who they are, to make sure they, stay connected with who they are as they layer up. And, that's all you can do, I guess, as a parent. But that curiosity when they're young is just infectious. It's just, I don't know,
It's
so
the
amazing.
it's the absolute best, man,
Yeah.
and I think that's possibly it's one of the issues when it comes to becoming an adult, right? Because you do have
Mm,
these different layers of code thrust upon you, and that bring challenges and trials, and there's certain bits of code that get forced into your life that you've got no choice but to
mhm,
apply it into your own system and all that sort of stuff, right? But the ability to keep that one part of the code open for curiosity, I think, is just insanely important. And what you said before is something that I want to dig into next. You're taking me all over the show. I love this. This is such a good conversation. I really want to dig into the word that you said there about the need for creativity in order to be able to adapt your code, alter your code, shift your code, or even just become aware that your code needs shifting, right?
mhm, mhm,
Um, Creativity is a part of our brains that is devolving. If you look at recent MRI studies and what have you, right?
mhm,
The fact that humans are becoming more robotic and robots are becoming more human-like, right? Which is, very interesting. Now, but from your perspective, as someone that is a code breaker, shall we say,
mhm.
that lives outside of the standardized coding of the world, what do you think humans can do in order to rediscover that childlike creativity within
Yeah,
themselves? How do you think people can break those hardened shells that have
yeah.
been forged over their years of existence?
Mm. So without too much navel gazing and years of coaching and whatever else, I think bringing to every single situation, opportunity, curiosity, like, and I actually have a sort of a tool that I go through with that, but just bringing curiosity, stepping back and noticing, just noticing what's going on here. Am I in a default way of operating here? And this is not something you'll do in every situation. It's a muscle build,
Mm,
but stepping back and being curious, not critical. So looking back, because curiosity creates the space for something different. It
mm,
creates the space for creativity. And then
mm,
accepting this is a reality right now, but acceptance doesn't mean approval. But it actually means I can use the energy that I might be directing at fighting reality
mm.
to navigating through it with purpose. And then, yeah, there's a few other people, but I think the main thing, curiosity and acceptance.
Amazing. Now, on this topic of curiosity, because I can hear a couple of listeners asking the questions around variations of a theme of, well, if you look at the way society has evolved,
Mhm.
you could argue that curiosity is taking it down some paths that just whether you could whether whether you argue that they don't compute or whether your perspective on it is that they do,
Mhm.
but the level, the amount of divergence that society has seen over the time, right?
Mhm.
Because of whether it is curiosity, whether it is like I said before, people's very set code
Mhm.
of how something needs to be, and you're wrong and I'm right, and blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
Um, Now, what is your take on where curiosity has taken society, and added to that the question I was really keen on asking you, which is, um, how has this code of society evolved, and can you say that it is broken based on the level of conflict that's in the world these days, or is
Mhm.
it just a level of code that we've not really gotten to grips with or understand right now?
Mm. Great question. So the first one around curiosity and where it's taken us. Curiosity has enabled us to move forward as a species.
Yep.
So it's been essential and it always will be. I think, maybe I was leaping forward. I was thinking maybe you're talking about conspiracy theories or jumping onto, is that where you're saying curiosity has gone a bit too far?
More so with the identity piece,
Oh,
I think I
okay.
wanna talk about. Yeah, well, like, the conspiracy or tin hat or whichever one you wanna call it, right?
Yeah.
Depending how skeptical you are.
Mhm.
No, that's for me, I just think that's imagination that I
Mhm.
think it actually highlights how cool humans can be, right? When they imagine all
Mm.
sorts of different things.
Yep.
And, but I'm talking more around identity, right?
Okay.
Because the reason why I want to focus on that is because of the fact that for a lot of people, even though there are so many different varieties of identity in terms
Mhm.
of from a societal point of view,
Mhm.
it's created a big concern amongst the individuals
Mhm.
that they're really struggling to actually discover what their own identity is because of the volume of identities that are being thrust out there, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
or, or identity frameworks, shall we call them?
Mm.
Now, so yeah, as it pertains to your language
Yeah.
around code, I think it's a fabulous way of really bringing this to life. Um, how do you feel society has gone with respect to how other people portray their codes, and how that the lack of compatibility?
I think it's a brilliant question. And first of all, I'll go big. Okay.
Mm,
So we've got curiosity. And then for me, the next part is connection.
mm,
So looking at how we're all connected.
mm,
And then we can apply critical thinking in like those three C's in that order. Now the connection piece, something that one of my dear friends from the local library where I wrote my book, smart guy, he said to me this one time, he said, if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, then we have all originated from one hydrogen atom. I mean, I think that's oversimplification, but we're all connected.
mm,
We all came from the same origin. So we have that resonance in each of us as human beings and with nature as well. There's that resonance. So in terms of that, my big mantra is let's focus less on what divides us and more on what binds us
mhm,
because we are all connected.
mm,
So that's what I always do in terms of any kind of situation. Look for the connection point. Okay, so if you're leading with that, and then I think if you're securing yourself, then identity isn't at the core of you. It's more of an outer layer. So, I think that's where we can go a bit off track. And I always like to look at things and for each individual to make their own decision, what's helpful and what's harmful. And you make the decision. It might be in the moment or, short, medium, or long term. So if it's helpful for you to jump in a box around identity, whatever that might be, I'm the ideal worker, I'm the ideal parent, whatever it is, I'm whatever label you want to give yourself, then ask yourself, is that helpful or is that harmful? Am I, then embedding a certain way of operating into my day to day? Am I limiting my opportunities for connection?
Mm,
Am I limiting my opportunities for creativity
mm,
and higher performance for connection? So I think that's where it lands there. And I think increasingly we keep moving from this place. It's a chicken and egg. The whole technology opportunities are feeding this. But it's like it's fine to be an individual, but being driven by individualistic, tendencies, individualism
mm,
fractures families, teams, societies.
mm,
So is the need to, you know, serve a certain identity and a tag and a label, is that helping me to, be part of something bigger? Is that helping me to connect to everyone? Is that helping me to be more successful? If it is, go for it.
mm,
But I can't speak for individuals, but if we look at it on a sort of population-wide basis, the reports of loneliness are increasing, depression, anxiety. And my humble opinion in this sense is because individualization is on and the individualistic kind of approach that we have, code of individualism, rather than the code of connection. And that's a
um,
choice. And so I'm going on a little bit about this, but loneliness I actually see any kind of uncomfortable emotion. So whether it's related to your identity or work, loneliness, frustration, anxiety, whatever it is, I actually just see it quite simply as an expectation gap. So it's the gap
mm,
between the relationship you're actually experiencing in the case of loneliness, the quality of the relationships you're experiencing versus the quality of the relationships you want and expect.
right.
Frustration, the same. Your expectations between what you're getting and what you want.
Mm.
Every expectation gaps, expectation gaps. I'm not saying we need to lower our standards, but we need to assess the gap and why we have the gap.
It's a really interesting point. That really, really interesting. What I've sort of observed is the prefix, and I've said this in a couple of previous podcasts, right? The prefix self has become like used exponentially in society. I found this graph one time. I can't really find. I've not been able to find it since. The amount that the word self has been used, all right, in
Mhm, mhm,
whatever, right, in whatever context, and it's like full exponential as you've gone in
mhm,
towards the back end of the 90s and noughties. Um, and and I think that because of that whole self whatever, right? That individualism and that need to have your identity be clearly defined aside from everybody else, it really does. It really goes against everything that is to be human, right? And it really does concern me how people who feel that they need to be so different, it's become so much more extreme, right?
mm,
They feel that that external shell of identity, that's an interesting concept, how identity is more of an external rather than an internal thing, right? And I'll come back to that just quickly in a sec. But because it's become more and more extreme, right? The examples have needed to become more and more extreme in order to stand out, right? And what have you. It's sort of pushed a lot of those people out from the majority of people they want to influence because of the fact that they have detached their code so much from everybody else in the world,
mhm.
then they're finding themselves on an island, right? It's almost like a lot of people do want to be on their island by themselves. That's essentially where they end up in the vast majority of cases. I really want to come back though to this whole topic of identity being an external cover, shall we say? Um,
Mhm.
so if identity is an external thing, how do you look at or how do you define like the internal DNA, the code of who we are as individuals, right? Is
Mhm.
the identity not a representation of our internal? Or you mentioned there, and it sort of comes full circle back to what your definition of success is, are the external and the internal match,
Mm.
right? How do you sort of define the external identity and the internal code? How do you define the difference or the connection between the two?
I think you nailed it really well. So the identity is an expression of your code, but is it a realistic expression of it? And
Mm,
so is it a realistic expression of your code and your operating system, or is it something that you've built to belong, to impress, to avoid shame, embarrassment, humiliation? And that is an answer that only each individual person can give.
I
So
love that. I love that. Identity is an expression of your code. And I really, really love that because you find that it's actually, for me, I believe that it's actually more of a problem for those that are more the people pleasers as it is those that are egotistical, right?
Mhm.
I've always had this thing around, humility leads to internal loneliness.
Mhm.
And this really does help to highlight why, right? Because
Mhm.
if the identity that you are putting out there is, the cover that you've put on your code is not expressive of your code, more so an identity based on what you think other people want your code to be, then that's where you end up. Your code ends up becoming a very, very lonely, disconnected to the system type
Mhm.
space, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if you can understand your code and have that then get projected out onto your identity, then therefore it becomes a lot easier for you to actually then become connected to the part of the system that you belong in.
Love it, love it. And then your responses, your rewards from your external environment and the people in it will be positive, so it'll feed your code and make it even stronger.
Far out, man. And we've just solved the world right there. That is
That's what
that is absolutely epic, absolutely epic. Now, let's round things off because I'm conscious that I've taken up plenty of your time, and I feel that lots of other people need to have you in front of them. So I'm going to let you go crack on and do that. But um, before I let you go, though, Danielle, there's always one question we like to round things off. And as we record this towards the end of 2025, obviously everybody has that whole new year, new stuff. And we were talking about this before we cracked on. You've got you've had some really cool sort of realizations, so you've discovered new bits to your code that
Mhm.
you're really wanting to rock and roll with. But as you look forward towards that next version of success for you, what do you think is one piece that is particularly missing from your code right now that you would love to discover and really add in?
Oh, I love this question because I've only recently worked this out. I'm a work in progress. There's always something to improve. And sometimes your strengths can actually act as a weakness. So,
Mm.
because someone who's constantly innovating, trying to improve, grow, get to the bottom of things, what I do is I do something, tick a box, and then I try something different. I don't stick to it. So, my goal, my edge going into 2026 is to stick with this, where I am now, the recode advantage, to build that out, be consistent and clear and communicate it and not move on to the next thing. So that is my piece of, the missing piece of the puzzle.
You finally found a bit of a North Star,
Yes.
which is what so making sure you keep that in front of you is
Yes,
sounds like the right way to go.
that's it.
I tell you what, Danielle, you're an absolute joy. I'm delighted that you've entered into my world and my code and whatnot and my system, and it's been a real privilege to have a chat to you. And I'm very, very excited to follow this recode advantage because I think your terminology, which is really what is flicking my switches, is the advantage coming from being the ability to recode. I think that is absolutely epic. And the way that you're articulating it is so pertinent towards the language that is being used these days. So I'm super excited for you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been amazing. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Andy.
Fabulous stuff. I tell you what, gang, make sure that you follow this woman with absolute interest, because I think next year could be epic. And I think that the language that Danielle is using is certainly language, if you are a parent in particular, it is language that you are going to want to get your laughing gear around, because it's certainly going to help you to feel more connected to your generations that are following you. So, team, I'm so grateful for this conversation. Make sure you have yourself a wonderful day. Stay safe, healthy, happy as always. And I look forward to catching you on the next episode. Make sure you go to the show notes. Follow Danielle. She's an absolute superstar, and your life is most certainly going to benefit from making sure that you pay attention to her. Till next time, gang, take care.